the most rewarding part of my job, I think what I enjoy most is just being able to meet each client when they come to us, get to know him or her and their family, and help them navigate a very, very intimidating, difficult, sometimes overwhelming process. And then at the end of the case, when we get a nice, successful results for them, there is great satisfaction that comes in knowing that you've done a good job and help them put the pieces back together and help them kind of move on, and put the tragedy behind them.
Hello, and welcome to the Palm Beach County Living Podcast. Here we talk about all the amazing people, events, businesses, and everything that makes Palm Beach County, Florida, such a fantastic place to live. As a local real estate agent, my clients always ask me about the best restaurants, events, jobs, and people here. So I developed this show to help you get a feel for all of the best that the Palm Beaches has to offer. With that being said, let's start the show right now. Hi, Eric. Happy to have you on the show today.
Hi, Melanie. Nice to see you.
I know we've known each other for a little while. It's been a little bit since we've caught up, since we both went to the same high school. But if you could you please introduce yourself to the audience?
Yeah. Hi. Well, first of all, great to see you again, Melanie. I am Eric Romano. I'm an attorney and a partner with Romano Law Group right here in West Palm Beach.
Mm-hmm. That's great. It's been a while, but it's so good to catch up with you again. Tell me a little bit, what drew you to your career in law?
Well, I grew up the son of a trial lawyer, and I not only did I have the privilege and honor of growing up watching my dad in the practice of law, but I now get to practice with him. We're going on almost 25 years of practicing together with my dad and one of my younger brothers. But growing up, I saw that my dad took just such great joy in his work and seemed to always come home. I wouldn't say happy because the work we do is not the work that brings happiness, because nobody needs our help until they've had a really bad day or tragedy. But he took great joy in his work and his ability to help others through difficult times. And I just remember seeing, how much joy his work seemed to bring him. And I always just grew up thinking, that's what I want to do. I want to find a profession that's going to bring me that kind of joy and satisfaction. And I followed him into the practice of law.
That's great. So I know that you teach both civil and criminal, or practice, I should say. Do you have a preference?
No, I like them both for different reasons. My interest in the criminal law started when I was in law school. I took a criminal prosecution clinic and worked at the state attorney's office over in Clearwater. Really enjoyed the experience, and then was fortunate enough to get a job here with the state attorney's office in West Palm Beach right out of law school. So I spent my first 3 years as a lawyer working as a prosecutor. So you get to prosecute criminal cases, start in the misdemeanor division, and then work up and start handling the more serious felony cases. And then when I left the state attorney's office, I went into civil practice, which we'll talk about, but that's more or less representing people and families who have suffered harm and tragedy as a result of the misconduct of others. But I've also stuck with doing criminal defense work because I've always found the criminal law to be interesting. It keeps me in the courtroom, which, as a trial lawyer, courtroom is where you want to be.
Mm-hmm. So do you prefer the defense or the prosecution? I know you kind of just alluded to the defense, but do you have a preference?
Yeah, not so much a preference. They're both very different. As a prosecutor, you feel, I mean, look, I'll tell you frankly, but on both sides, you feel as though you're wearing a white hat. As a prosecutor, you feel you're wearing the white hat because you're protecting the community. You're prosecuting people who are accused of committing crimes, of harming others. So you're kind of protecting the victims, protecting the community, and imposing consequences and penalties on wrongdoers.
Mm-hmm.
In criminal defense, I also view that as wearing the white hat because you're holding the government to its obligations under the Constitution.
Mm-hmm.
And my view with criminal defense is, look, as a criminal defense lawyer, your job generally is to make sure that the police, the prosecutors, the judge, that everybody does their job the right and legal way. And if everybody does that, the system generally works. And although it's not a perfect system, I would say the system usually gets it right, certainly most of the time. But in the criminal side or the criminal defense side, I get to advocate for an individual, my client, who has been accused by the government of breaking the law. Uh,
Mhm.
so it certainly brings with it some unique challenges and unique responsibilities.
I would imagine so. Now, I know or I assume that you do both teach and lecture. Do you have a favorite place that you like to do that?
Well, not so much a favorite. I am fortunate enough to get the opportunity to teach all over the country, generally on trial advocacy, both on the criminal and civil side. But I generally speak and present to different groups of lawyers at conferences, at legal association conventions. It is part of our ongoing education. And like I tell my kids, if you care about your work, then your homework never ends. Because they're at the age where they're kind of getting near the end of their formal education. And I said, well, it's great that you're graduating, but don't think your homework's going to stop. So, like with any profession, I every day is an opportunity for me to learn more, and the more I learn, the more I have to share and to try to teach others. So, um, it's it's a something I certainly enjoy doing quite a bit, and get to meet a lot of really great people around the country in the process.
Okay, speaking of education and people around the country, I'm assuming that that means that you travel internationally, or have you studied international as well?
Both. Yeah, in
Okay.
law school, I had an opportunity to do a study abroad program in Innsbruck, Austria. And not only was it a fascinating program, got to do a little bit of a deep dive into international law, at least for a few months.
Mhm.
It was a wonderful opportunity to travel internationally and get to spend a summer, uh, exploring other cultures and other countries, and that really kind of catapulted my interest in travel, not just in the U.S. but internationally. So it's one of my passions is when I am not here at my desk working. My wife and I generally try to take our kids and travel to as many new and different places as we can.
That's great. Do you have a favorite place you like to travel to?
The mountains,
Okay.
anywhere there's mountains.
Okay.
So people always find it interesting that as somebody who's grown up here a few miles from the beach in South Florida,
Mm.
um,
Mhm.
I almost never go to the beach, and any opportunity we get to travel, we go searching out the mountains.
Mhm. Mhm. I used to obviously live by the beach and I used to go all the time, but as I find myself getting older, definitely drawn to different areas, mountainous, unusual places um to explore because, not to diss the beach because I love the beach, but it's very unique to travel obviously to other places and um have different experiences. So what do you think would be the best part of your job, like day to day? What do you enjoy doing most?
Look, the greatest part of it is the clients I get to represent. As I mentioned earlier, the nature of our work is such that nobody picks up the phone to call our office until they've had a really bad day. And for most of our clients, it is the worst day of their lives. They have suffered a horrible tragedy in the family or have been in an uh, just unimaginable incident that has turned their life upside down. So they come to us not just seeking legal help, but also seeking somebody who can help them kind of pick up the pieces and put them back together. They are often out of work because of their injuries. They're worried about mounting medical bills. They're worried about how do they get their car fixed. They're trying to navigate complicated insurance issues in dealing with a process that is foreign to most people, and they're
Mhm.
kind of thrust into it. So the the most rewarding part of my job, I think what I enjoy most is just being able to meet each client when they come to us, get to know him or her and their family, and help them navigate a very, very intimidating, difficult, sometimes overwhelming process. And then at the end of the case, when we get a nice, successful results for them, there's great satisfaction that comes in knowing that you've done a good job and help them put the pieces back together and help them kind of move on, um, and put the tragedy behind them.
So, as a layperson, obviously, we don't know the law. What do you think? Is there something that you know most people should know, or legal issue that they should be aware of that most people aren't aware of?
Oh, so many. I'll tell you that it's a great question. And it's probably a very long list because I'll tell you that of course, every case is different. Every client that comes to us, we will have multiple conversations about the issues that pertain to their particular situation.
Mhm.
In every case, they are surprised to learn something. Because a lot of times we'll tell them, here's the law that applies to your case. Here's what we can and cannot do. Sorry, my light decided to
That's
turn off.
okay.
Um, so it's different in every case, but I'll tell you one common one that we see because a lot of our work involves people that have been hurt or tragically killed in motor vehicle and trucking accident, and truck crashes. Um, this surprises most everybody. Florida is the only state in the country that does not require drivers to carry any liability insurance. And
Yeah.
when you've got 23 million plus people living in the state, you've got millions of visitors that come to Florida every year as tourists and rent cars. Just the sheer number of cars we have on the roads, it is stunning to me as a lifelong Floridian and as a lawyer, and stunning to most people that we're the only state in the country that doesn't require drivers to carry liability insurance. Uh,
Mhm.
and so now, thankfully, most choose to purchase it, but they choose the bare minimum just to keep their premiums low.
Mhm.
And so it's something that we've been working on through the legislature for years to change that. In fact, back in 2021, the legislature passed a bill that would require every driver to carry bodily injury liability insurance. Uh,
Mhm.
the governor vetoed it. So we remain the only state in the country that doesn't require drivers to carry the liability insurance.
Mm. That's pretty interesting. I know whenever I speak to my friends that are either just moved here or are visiting, they always say your traffic is absolutely the worst. Florida people do not know how to drive. Nobody's ever uses an indicator. They're just so shocked about how terrible it is to drive in Florida. And I'm like, well, you have to understand, everybody comes to Florida. It's not just Florida drivers. We have so many tourists and so many people from other states that are constantly visiting us. It's not just that Florida people don't know how to drive. It's just it's an interesting dynamic and an interesting group of people that are on the road at the same time, that maybe to your point don't know all the laws of the road, and how appropriately to protect themselves or anything like that. So obviously that's an interesting challenge. Do you have any challenges that you face day to day?
I, I do. Yeah. I mean, look, in every case, we're dealing with an insurance company on the other side.
Mm,
And as I often tell people, look, if insurance companies always did the right thing, I'd be out of work. Insurance companies that obviously serve a very important purpose in our daily lives. All of us, we all buy insurance. We need insurance. It is there for a reason. Um, but it's in every case we handle, there's an insurance company on the other side,
mm,
because it is that insurance coverage that whether it applies to a company whose vehicle was involved in the crash, whether it's the insurance company that insures the at fault driver, we're typically dealing with insurance companies. So the biggest challenge I think is dealing with the insurance companies, and trying to persuade them of their insured's wrongdoing or liability and my client's damages or the harm that my client suffered, and trying to persuade the insurance company to pay a fair amount to resolve those claims. And we don't always see eye to eye, which is why there is so much litigation and ultimately why we have judges and juries.
Mm-hmm. Hmm. It's very interesting that you mentioned, unfortunately, that the government vetoed having better coverage. Now, I know that you have an undergraduate degree in business management. How do you think that helps you with your law practices?
Well, in a lot of ways, I'll tell you, I gravitated towards business management just because I always had an interest in business growing up. And I felt that, in college, my undergrad years, I still wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do after college. And I
Mm.
felt that a degree in business management would help me in no matter what field I went into. And now, as a partner in a law firm, I am essentially one of the owners, one of the managing partners. So that background in business management has helped me in the day to day business side of the practice of law, which is, of course, a big part of what we do aside from just practicing law. So, in addition to represent my clients and being their legal advocate, I also have a business to run. We've got,
Mhm.
uh, you know, nearly 40 employees. So trying to cover your marketing, your overhead expenses, covering payroll, human resources, all of the things that go into running a business. I at least learned the foundation with that business management degree.
I'm sure that definitely came in handy for sure. So, if someone wanted to hire you, how did they get a hold of you?
Easiest way to find me is my website, romanolowgroup.com. And I know I'm listed on there with my bio, my email, my contact information. But that is the best way to track me down.
Okay, fantastic. Is there anything that else that you would like to discuss that I didn't ask you about the law?
Oh, so many things. No, I could sit here, of course, you could probably tell. I love what I do, and I just recently passed my 25th year as a practicing
Wow.
lawyer, um, which is hard to believe that it's gone by so fast. But I can truly say that I enjoy it as much today as I did the day I got sworn in 25 years ago. Um, it is a uniquely challenging job, and I kind of alluded to this earlier. You know, people come to us with bad news,
Mhm,
and um, a lot of times I feel that not only am I wearing my lawyer hat, but I have to put on my grief counselor hat,
mhm.
my therapist hat, my, sometimes you're just a shoulder to cry on. And you got to have deep compassion and empathy for the clients that are coming to you, because many times they come in, and particularly in a wrongful death case where somebody has lost a loved one, they don't come to us thinking that this is their opportunity to cash in on the loss of a loved one. They come to us more often wanting answers, wanting accountability, wanting to understand, how did this happen? Why did it happen? What steps can we take to make sure that this never happens to another family? Um, and so it's a big part of what we do. And there's a lot of reward that comes with helping families through those tough times. But that passion to represent people and to do the best job you can for them, um, it hasn't subsided. And frankly, if I ever sense that the passion to do that is subsiding, it's time for me to move on to something else, because you can't do this half-heartedly. You got to be all in for every client. That's what they deserve. That's what they expect.
Well, you can definitely, I'm just by talking to you, I can definitely sense your passion and your empathy. It definitely exudes from you, which is refreshing because I think a lot of times, unfortunately, until you need a lawyer, sometimes they have like a bad connotation. But as soon as someone needs one, all of a sudden they're the best in the world. So, um,
Right. I often say, look, everybody hates lawyers until they need one. Right?
right.
True. I understand we get a bad rap, and that may be there are many bad apples out there, and I know people have heard all the lawyer jokes and some of the bad stories about lawyers. But it is true, when somebody needs one, they need a good one. They need one with empathy and compassion, and who's going to be able to help them through a tough process.
Now, I know you've um, devoted 25 years of your life to law, but I understand that you also played a little football.
I did.
Can you tell me about that?
I did. Well, I grew up as the oldest of four boys, and my dad, who I mentioned earlier, was an athlete growing up. He actually played football here at Cardinal Newman High School in West Palm. Went on and played football on a scholarship at Florida State for Coach Bill Peterson back in the '60s. That was shortly before Bobby Bowden's tenure.
Mm.
And so, with a household of four boys, we of course grew up in. I would just say our environment was all sports all the time. So we grew up as athletes, playing every sport we could get our hands on. And then my brothers and I all really gravitated towards football, and we all went through Cardinal Newman, played football there, which happens to be right across the street here from my office. Uh, and then we all went on to play college football at different schools. Uh,
Okay.
I went and played at Florida State for Coach Bobby Bowden.
Hmm. Now, Bobby Bowden, he has an interesting personality. I think he's pretty much known for it. How was your experience, or what's something memorable that you remember from playing with him?
Oh, I loved it. Wonderful, wonderful man, a wonderful football coach. Obviously, brought great success to Florida State. But growing up as a Florida State football fan,
Hmm.
watching Coach Bowden and watching his teams, it really was a lifelong dream of mine to get an opportunity to go play for Florida State and specifically for Coach Bowden. And I'll tell you, of the many, many great memories of that time, probably the one that sticks out the most is just the first time I was there when I reported as a freshman, went in for our first day of practice, in the locker room getting suited up for our first trip out to the practice fields. And Coach Bowden pulls everybody together in the locker room to give kind of a pep talk as we're getting ready for the first practice of the season. And I just vividly remember sitting there in the Florida State locker room, surrounded by guys I had been watching playing on TV, 1, 2 years earlier, and the legendary Coach Bowden, who I had idolized growing up, just being there in the locker room in that environment as part of the team now. It's just memory that will always stick with me. It's very special.
That's so great. So, what position did you play?
I was a tight end.
Okay, that's awesome. And so, who? I mean, I assume you're still a Seminoles fan, but do you have any other favorite team?
There
Yep,
you
yep.
go.
There you go. There you go.
I am a big, big college sports fan, and particularly
Mhm.
college football. So, Florida State, of course, is my team. I will have to acknowledge, though, one of my sons is currently a incoming junior at the University of Florida. So I
Oh,
did raise a Gator, and
okay.
one who is happily a Gator. Um, but I kind of adopted my brother's teams. I told you they all played college football as
Mhm,
well. So
mhm.
Todd played at the University of Iowa. Go Hawkeyes. Chad played
Okay.
at Kansas State. So go Wildcats. And then Ryan, my youngest brother, played at Clemson. Go
Wow.
Tigers. So my brother's teams have kind of been my adopted college football
Okay.
teams over the years. So I cheer for them as long as they're not playing Florida State.
Exactly. So you mentioned that your son is at UF. Do you think he's going to go into the family practice as well of law?
I don't think so. So I've
Okay.
got an older daughter who's 22 who just graduated from Florida State,
Okay.
and my son Braden who's at UF, and then our youngest who's in high school. My two older ones have no interest in the practice of law, but my youngest has expressed an interest in maybe going on to law school. So
Okay.
you never know. Maybe
Okay.
he'll come practice with dad, and take this family practice into the third generation.
Oh, that's so great. So obviously you mentioned that you grew up here in South Florida and you currently live in South Florida. I mean, what do you love about living in Palm Beach County?
It's summer all year round, right?
It's
It,
true. Yeah.
we we have 2 seasons here, summer and then a slightly cooler summer. So, although, as I told you earlier, I'm not a big beach fan, and frankly, my family really isn't either. But Florida is a wonderful place to live because you got generally great weather year round. And for us as a family who loves to travel, this is a great home base. And
Mhm.
uh, so, no matter where you travel, you always come home knowing you're going to have generally nice, warm weather and a cool breeze.
That's very, very true. What do you think is unique about practicing law in Florida?
Ooh, I'll tell you one of the unique things, at least over the last several years, is that our legislature is constantly changing the law, generally in a harmful way for Floridians.
Mm,
Um, our courts have shifted in a way that the law has become very unpredictable, and that's not good. I mean, the law, for all of us as citizens who have to know and follow the law, you want the law generally to be predictable so that
mm,
everybody knows here's what's expected in my everyday affairs. Here's how I plan my everyday affairs, and here are the consequences. If we're not following the law, it's
mhm.
how an orderly society works. And the last several years in Florida, the legislature and our courts have made that more and more challenging. So, as a lawyer, the law, I mean, just in the last 2 or 3 years,
Mhm.
decades of legal precedent in Florida have been basically thrown out the window in ways that harm millions of Floridians, and most Floridians have no clue they've been harmed.
Yeah.
So, trying to keep up with that, trying to educate the public, not just to get involved in the legislative process to prevent these bad bills from passing, but educating the public and our clients about the impact of these new laws and what it means for day to day life going forward.
Mhm.
So that's probably I wouldn't say it's unique to Florida, but those challenges seem to me to be probably a little more amplified in Florida than they might be in some other states.
Mm. That's really interesting that you say, like, within the past couple of years or so, it's definitely amped. Um, why do you think that is? Why do you think it's been fairly recently that everything's kind of changed?
Um, well, it's a number of reasons, and I will avoid getting on my political soapbox, but
Sure.
it's just uh, the makeup of the legislature in Tallahassee. Our governor has had a number of policies that he has kind of imposed on the legislature and asked the legislature to pass bills implementing policies that are priorities of his agenda. And in terms of what I see every day, representing injured victims, victims that have been harmed by the wrongdoing of others. And keep in mind, as I said earlier, people come to us, they've had a bad day. Generally, they're going about their daily lives doing absolutely nothing wrong. And then their life is upended because somebody else did something wrong. They were careless, they were negligent, they cut corners, they put profits before safety. I see the worst of the worst conduct and the harm that it causes. Uh, the legislature and others in Tallahassee have kind of said, look, we would rather protect bad businesses. We would rather protect um, the insurance industry. We would rather protect bad actors than the innocent victims and their families who have been harmed. So those are the types of laws that have been passed, basically protecting the wrongdoers at the expense of their victims.
Mm, that's tough. That's frustrating.
It's very tough. I mean, we every year we have to turn away a lot of people that come to us seeking help because we have to say, look, I'm sorry you were harmed or wronged by someone else, but the legislature has already determined you don't get to even walk into the courthouse.
Mm,
They've already determined, without ever knowing the facts of your case, they're not going to allow you to go hold your wrongdoer accountable. I'm sorry, there's nothing we can do. And that's a very disappointing conversation to have with somebody.
I would assume so. So I think that kind of leads to making sure that, if you live in Florida, you have to have a lawyer that obviously knows the ever changing law, someone who's been in Florida, who knows, what it was, what it is. Someone with 25 years of experience would obviously be the person to look for. So I think, with that in mind, obviously, if someone is, looking to help educate and get some knowledge of the law, you want someone to represent you that knows their business. So that's probably why the Romano Law Group is where they should look for. I'm just throwing that out there. It's probably
Thank
pretty
you for that.
important that you get someone who's passionate, empathetic, and knows the law. Obviously, very important things. So just to kind of twist this a little bit, because I don't know, it could kind of meld with what we just spoke about, but maybe not, would be if you could meet a famous public figure, person, celebrity, alive or dead, who would you like to meet?
I'll tell you, that is a great question. And I'll bet I could come with a very long list, but I'll tell you who immediately comes to mind is President John F. Kennedy. I've
Okay.
always admired him. Um, I was born after he was assassinated, so my knowledge of him certainly is just reading in the history books. But I've always admired not just his charisma and leadership skills, um, but his ability to navigate very, very tough, challenging situations in his presidency, his knack for politics, which, to be successful in politics, you've got to be able to appeal to a wide audience, his ability to get up and speak. I mean, just as a speaker, I mean, it's hard to find anybody that was better. But I think in many challenging issues, he brought diverse viewpoints and people together, at least trying to understand where different groups were coming from. And so I had great admiration for him in all of those things. And I would love to talk to him, particularly in looking at today's political environment. Love to sit down and get his thoughts on, hey, how do we start to unify people
Mhm.
again and
Yeah.
try to get back to finding our common ground? Because I
Def-
do truly believe um, we probably have a lot more we all can agree on than what we disagree on.
mhm.
That the small part we disagree on that has become far too divisive lately.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed. All right. That leads me to my next question. If you could instantly master any skill or talent, what would you want that to be?
Again, many. If I had free time, I'd try to practice several of them. But if I could instantly be granted one skill, I would love to be able to sing.
Oh,
I've always thought, people that have a great singing voice, they get up and sing instantly, and they just bring joy to people that are listening.
mhm.
And I was unfortunately not blessed with a good singing voice.
Yeah. uh, me either. So, do you have a favorite singer or favorite group?
Oh, favorite group probably is Pearl Jam, but and Eddie Vedder and Pearl Jam probably would be my favorite. But I have a very diverse musical tastes, but
Mhm.
Pearl Jam is probably the group that I'll travel almost anywhere in the country to go see them play.
Oh, that's I am also a fan of Pearl Jam for sure. I remember when I saw them in Miami when they first started in 91 or 92. Amazing show. Amazing show.
Yeah, was that part of Lollapalooza?
No, it was they showed up at the Cameo. They, like, literally were Alive had just kind of caught, caught on in, that album. I believe the album was 10, if I remember
Yeah,
correctly.
that's right.
Um, that kind of just, like, really became mainstream, and, like, they walked through the front door of the Cameo while we're all standing in line. I mean, they were so, like, I don't wanna say unknown, but, unknown for that, they couldn't do that now.
Right.
So, it was an amazing concert. I enjoyed it thoroughly. Um,
Yeah. Well, and they still sound great.
yeah, yeah, definitely. Okay. So What is something you enjoy or a hobby that you have that most people don't know about?
I hinted at this earlier. I think it's travel. If I could just if I could drop everything at work and do something with my free time, I would get my wife and my kids, and we would hop on a plane and travel somewhere. So we just, we just got back from a nice trip a few weeks ago, and on the flight home, every trip we do this, we say, all right, where are we going to go next? So we're already kind of planning our next trip. So it's we as a family, we just love to travel together. So that would be my passion. And travel, by the way, would be, as I mentioned, the mountains. I am much happier in a tent in the woods than I am in a suite at the Ritz Carlton. It's just kind of the way we are. I love the outdoors, and so travel usually involves hiking and just being outside.
Is there a place you haven't gone yet that you'd like to go to?
Oh, lots. The Well, I'll tell you, in a few weeks, we're going to Costa Rica.
Nice.
That is actually kind of a working vacation because I'll be there for a conference and some meetings, but it's about half vacation. Uh,
Yeah.
so Costa Rica is a place I've never been. I've always heard wonderful things, so we are excited to get down there and see it.
I would think that would be a very fun place to work and have fun as well. So Costa Rica, I think all the fabulous, not only like the beach, mountain, all that stuff, but I'm also thinking food and drink. So that brings me to, do you have a favorite restaurant, local restaurant that you like to visit?
Oh, lots of them. Because we're always on the go. It seems like we dine out far more than we dine in. We got some great spots. Well, I'll tell you, if you want kind of a nice fancy Italian restaurant, um, the and of course now I'm blanking on the name of it. Renato's in Palm Beach. Renato's on Worth Avenue is
Okay.
if you really want high end.
Okay.
But out our way in Wellington, one of our favorites is Mississippi Sweets, a great little a local barbecue place. Yeah,
I told my husband I want to try that. So I'm definitely going to. You're not the first person who said that. So I definitely want to check that out. So fabulous. Wonderful. Well, Eric, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
well, thanks for
Is
having
there
me.
anything else you want to share? Anything else you'd like to discuss before we go?
No, I want to say thank you for having me. I love the show. I love the format. You're wonderful as an interviewer, and I've really enjoyed this. So thank you.
Eric, you're so fabulous. Thank you so much. And I can't say enough wonderful, positive things about you. And I hope people do pay attention and check out the Romano Law Group because it's hard to find someone that is really going to be as passionate and as I want to say devoted to the law as you are. So thank you for your time and thank you for sharing your passion with us.
Thanks, Melanie.
It was great talking to you.
You too.